What's up, everybody? The Fresh Out team recently visited Idaho State Prison, and we were able to get some phenomenal footage behind the wall with inmates doing time, trying to change their lives. They have a podcast, they have a recording studio in there, and they also have some editing equipment that they're utilizing to create job skills that will help these people be employable in the future. We would like to help these gentlemen update their equipment so that they can further their career goals and their ambitions with recording, editing, and filming. Therefore, we're donating $500, and our goal is to raise $1,500 so that we can help provide new equipment. You can donate by clicking the link in the description and sending money to the PayPal so that we can help these people continue to pursue their goals and dreams. You know, people always asking us about rehabilitation. Well, this is one of the probably the most progressive rehabilitation programs I've seen behind bars that actually gives people an opportunity for positive change and to create self-value. Therefore, if you want to continue to support and help these people in Idaho State Prison pursue their dreams, donate and become part of the movement with Fresh Out, changing lives. What's up, everybody? Big Herc 916, getting down with Fresh Out. Make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and share the channel because we're doing big things over here. We're at Idaho State Prison, and man, we've been getting some very interesting content while we're here. And Travis, shout out to Travis for making this all happen, and shout out to Idaho State Prison for allowing us to come in and share some stories from people who wouldn't normally have the opportunity to share their story. And right now I have an interesting gentleman with me here who has a hell of a story. Barry, doing time here, and man, I'm gonna just let him take it from here. Barry, share with our audience a little bit about your background and where you're from.
Background-wise, when I start thinking about how to tell my story a little bit, I don't have the background a lot of people do, and it makes me wonder whether it relates or not. I was brought up in a really small town over in eastern Idaho. There wasn't a big gang problem. It was a little small town, about 10,000 people. Very religious town, religious family, had good upbringing, had good values I was taught, went to good schools, the whole 9 yards. And that's kind of the environment that I came out of. Today I feel really fortunate and really blessed that I have that because I still draw on that. But I've gone through my times of, hey, how do I explain how I ended up in this situation? How do I explain how I got here? Because it doesn't jive at all with the way I was brought up.
Well, there are people who will be able to relate, because like not everybody came from just a really broken home that resulted in them making bad choices. That's why your story is interesting, because people want to know, how did you, get to a place where you ended up in a place, a situation like this.
Yeah, and I think that boils down to choices. I think that as I look back on it, I just made choices and choices and choices, and they ultimately just ended me up in a really bad place.
And I tell people that it's not the thing you got caught for that is the reason you're in prison. It's the momentum of the choices that led to those choices that led to the choice.
Yeah.
And I feel like, the same way, man, because it's just, after one choice, and then that leads to another one, and then it just kind of spirals. Right. What was the actual choice that led to this particular situation?
So my situation is, I just finished a few months back my 34th year in prison on a life without parole. I'm in on a first-degree murder and a robbery. The state sought the death penalty on me. Very narrowly escaped getting the death penalty on it. They were staking it to the very end, and the state, or the court, just had some mercy on me and basically said, "Oh, I'm going to give you life without instead." And that's been my situation. I was arrested 3 days before I turned 21, and I've been in prison ever since.
Oh wow! And it's just a small variable. I mean, I've had situations where it could have went south, and it could have been, I could have been in the same predicament. So I mean, people think like, oh, one plan that sounds like it has no flaws in it. It could be all kind of things that are actually happening in the process. And at 21, your ability to make sound decisions and kind of decipher things and put them in a perspective is not as what it is today, as far as in retrospect. I mean, right. Looking back in retrospect, I mean, I know there's a lot of things you kind of would look at differently, or even say like, man, how did I make that decision?
Right. And I'm not seeing where they would lead to also.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
I was raised, there was no alcohol in my home, there was no drugs in my home, in my town. I mean, they were there, but that wasn't something I was brought up in. I had my first taste of a beer ever in my life when I was 15 years old. But within 6 months of that, I had overdosed on alcohol. I almost killed myself. And I was just a little 15-year-old guy.
Wow.
And I had heard my friends at school talking about how they went out and drank a fifth over the weekend. So me not knowing anything about alcohol, even at that point, I go home and I slam a fifth of Bacardi rum. And I'm a little guy, I'm 15 years old, and I didn't start growing until late. So I slammed a fifth of Bacardi rum, put it in a double quart jar, threw some orange juice in there, and I drink this whole thing in 10 minutes. And then I run across town to the skating rink. And I'm literally just almost dead when I get there. But that's where I was. I mean, 6 months from my first beer.
Wow.
So it just kind of grabbed me really quickly. So I kind of drank throughout my year, when I was 15, my freshman year, and then when I started my sophomore year at 16, that's when I started doing some of the weed and stuff like that. And it just went downhill. That was kind of the introduction. I'm in this little bitty town. You'd think that nothing like this happens, and at 16 years old, the first time I ever see cocaine, I use it. The first time I ever use it, I'm using a needle.
Oh my God. And
I almost died. I overdosed and almost died, but I couldn't. I just felt the rush, and that was the grab with cocaine right there, and it was the first time I'd ever even been around this stuff.
Wow. So would you say that was it peer pressure or just the type of crowd you were running with that you felt like, because it was you had lived such a isolated life, that when you seen this stuff, it was just your curiosity was just beyond what you would think a normal kid was, right? Or what do you think?
I think it was all those things, trying to fit in. there was a certain point, there was a certain amount of, I had a really kind of a heavy religious upbringing that I wasn't really sure about. Kind of felt like it was like to whatever I believed, it wasn't like I had a choice. I felt like I didn't have a choice. It was like, of course that's what you believe because that's the only thing you've ever seen.
Yes.
The same religious upbringing I had in my family was also the same, basically the dominant religion in the entire community. So it was just kind of like this realization hit me, and this actually happened when I was about 12. And I really distinctively remember this thought in my head. It was like, I believe all these things I've been taught, and then at the same time there was this, and of course you do because you've never seen one thing other than what you've been of this one environment. So that kind of made old Barry a little angry little guy for a few years. And that kind of fed it. So I was trying to like break away from all that stuff. So anything that was kind of like against the way I was brought up, that's where I was headed.
Okay.
A few years down the road. So it was just kind of like anything that wasn't all about the religious stuff, anything that wasn't all about that. I wanted to have some of that, and I wanted to try some of that. But I really didn't realize how quickly. I mean, I still sit here and I go, how does a 16-year-old kid end up shooting cocaine the first time he ever sees it in the town I came from? It's just completely out of character for everything about how I was brought up.
So, I mean, I know friends, well, you call them your friends by default because you go to school with them, or maybe they live in the same neighborhood, and you're thinking like, hey, these guys are, I'm trying to fit in, or, maybe when you get to school, you find other peer groups you try to, connect with. Was this group different from the group you initially kind of were brought up with? So they seemed like more exciting, or did it seem like, maybe, these guys are, I have more of a connection with them, so you kind of were drawn to them? Because I know for myself, I felt like I had an identity thing where I was trying to figure out like, who am I? Where do I fit in? Or, how do I find myself? So I was looking to try to fill that void.
Right. I don't attribute it to peer pressure, because I think I was deliberately kind of like, there was these, the kind of folks that I was raised up around, and I started just like, this is just really like super square. It was super straight, and I was like, I just want to know something more about life in this world and everything like that. So I think that was, I don't attribute anything to somebody else's, peer pressure, any of that. That was me making those choices on who I wanted to hang out with, who I wanted to start kicking with, and it was the little kids and stuff that I grew up with until I was about 15 or 16 was different from about 16 on. And so, it was me making choices that were different than what they had been through my growing up years.
As far as like, was there anybody in particular that you looked up to as a role model during this period, or you were kind of searching for a role model? I mean, I know you had, like you said, a family with strong religious ties, and, you had good values at home, but I know sometimes outside the house you're looking for role models or somebody who has an impression on you. Is there...
I think that was already there, and I've heard you talk about that need for a male role model. My folks got divorced when I was 8, and my mom just did a fantastic, I mean, you can't, you'd never meet a woman who was more dedicated to being a good mother than my mom. But yet, me and my brothers were still missing that male role model. And to what extent that plays in there, I can see that it would have been helpful to have somebody that could kind of do more than what that she was trying to do. It wasn't until later, I think, that I realized, I was actually looking for that.
The reason I say that is because, like, my mom, same thing. She was a great mom. She wasn't abusive, didn't do drugs. I mean, she worked hard. I mean, 2 jobs, sometimes sleeping only 4 hours a day, and, always try to instill good values. But, even when you get in a little bit of trouble here and there, you're still like I think back like now with hindsight, like, man, having that male that kind of like guides you, because kids, I think you're most vulnerable from 12 to like that early teen, like 15, 16, because there's a lot of things taking place mentally, maturity, hormones. You don't really, especially in young men, we're so vulnerable at that point. A lot of times, that's why getting into high school sports, you have a coach.
Right.
You know, come here, you know, let's go after practice, or, you know, you're playing, you know, running track, or you're doing, you got, you know, those things are outside of, you know, not trying to necessarily be an NBA or NFL player, is having that mentorship. The team, you know, sits together, coach had a talk, and I didn't really have, you know, I didn't connect with that. You know, I didn't have enough of that, I guess. But I think that's a big part of just, especially high school, you know,
Right.
and going into as an adult. So, I mean, as you started getting involved in these other things, you know, did it just escalate from 16?
Yeah, I think it just, again, I was making choices and then not realizing how quickly I was kind of really, you know, it wasn't like I went through this really big fun period of, drugs and alcohol were like really fun. I really went into a kind of like a really deep end really quickly. You know, and I can sit there and I can look at choices that I made in my life. I can also say, okay, you had a really addictive personality. You had all these things going on. But yeah, at the end of my sophomore year when I was 16, me and a friend of mine, we basically talked ourselves into going and doing this burglary, and both got in trouble, and I ended up getting made a ward of the state at that point in time, and and so that's kind of started a series of in and out of drug treatment centers, in and out of reform school, in and out of jail, foster homes that kind of went on from about the time I was 16 until I was 18. That was just the story of my life for those period of times. Is I was basically out of my hometown, and that was it. I was kind of in that, I wouldn't say state-raised kid, because that wasn't what I was, but I was in the same environment, in the same circle as the state-raised kids. You know, the foster homes and the like I say, the reform schools, the detention centers, all that stuff. So.
And you know, once you actually, you know, got out of the whole foster home state situation, leading up to when you actually caught your case, and then when you caught your case, you know, was there any point leading up to that maybe you seen like other opportunities, or you were kind of like, just because of the choices you had made, it was kind of, and the lifestyle, you're kind of like oblivious to other options?
I think oblivion is a good point. I just basically just got lost to drugs, and that was really all that I was after.
Okay.
And I know I got out of reform school when I was 18 and a half. So like first time ever, no probation, no PO, no nothing. I'm free. I can go live wherever I want. And I moved from southeast Idaho down to Salt Lake, and I just, you know, I'm back into drinking and using all the time. And then about a year later, got really super involved in the cocaine again, and that was kind of like where I really went, just kind of really went over the edge, and ended up down there after about a year solid of just using cocaine as much as I could possibly get my hands on. I just kind of hit an end and attempted suicide. And they came and found me. I had my wrist was slit, and I had taken about 3 months supply of these antidepressants, and basically found out that I hadn't gone about the wrist job correctly, but the drugs were about ready to kill me. So they got ambulanced out and everything like that. Out of the hospital, put into a drug treatment center again. And again, this is my mom always there, kind of rescuing me, trying to get me into a drug treatment center to get me squared away. And then when I moved back, or got out of drug treatment center, it was like, look, I don't have a job, I don't have a place to stay or anything like that. And so basically asked my mom if I could move back with the family back up to Idaho, and ended up doing that. And the idea was I would go up there, I'd get a job, I'd start getting all these bills that I'd left, had been neglected, had a whole stack of bills that from Salt Lake and everything like that I just needed to get on top of. And the idea was, you know, get squared away, have a roof over your head, get a job, just kind of get doing this stuff. And I wasn't doing any of that. And what was really kind of going on is just this stupid plotting and scheming to try to, how do I become a big drug dealer? That was kind of I guess when you say what's the role model, that was my ideal of how do you make money, how do you get ahead in life, how do you do all these things. It was the big drug dealer. That was kind of like my image of the guy, you know. And ultimately, about 6 months after I'd moved back to my mother's house, went out and did a robbery that turned into a murder.
Oh man.
And that was kind of how it was. That my sense of conscience, I can look back at it now, and I can kind of get a feel for, what transpired over there. And along the way, I think especially with the cocaine use, my sense of conscience basically just it went away.
Yeah.
I couldn't empathize with anybody. I couldn't really relate to any of the harm I was causing to anybody else. And that got to be a point to where, I'm in the middle of a robbery, and I do not care at all about the person that I end up killing.
And after you got arrested, I mean, did it take a minute for it to actually hit you, the reality of what you've done, or did it kind of like, come at a point where you're like, man, what have I done? Or, the realization of like, the future and your consequences.
Well, and that kind of began the story of kind of getting myself to where I am today. It took him two months to break the case. Meanwhile, I mean, it's hard to explain. I'd committed this crime, and then the next day I'm going to work acting like nothing's happened.
Oh, wow.
I wasn't caught. I got away.
Yeah.
The community is in an uproar about this horrible crime that's happened, and I'm trying to act normal, but I'm all strung out on cocaine again too. And my family knew that I was back on coke. They didn't know what was going on, so my mom's again trying to put me into treatment. So I go into treatment, and I stay there for just a couple of days, but I still got a bunch of coke that's out on the streets, and I just can't get away from. I got to get back to where that coke is at. And so I checked out of treatment center against medical advice after a handful of days. Go on a bender. I use up all the coke. Then I kind of come down. And in that coming down process, there was this day where it just hit me. I have really fucked up. And I'm really fucked up. And I think that was like the last seed of a conscience that I had at that point.
Man, were you? I mean, I can only, I can't imagine. But I mean, as far as sitting there with that on your mind, were you just to the point where like, man, I'm just, it's just a matter of time before they come get me, or did you feel like you needed to reach out to your mom, just like maybe break down and say, Mom, I really fucked up, or, I mean, what's going through your mind, or did you just say, like, man, I need to turn myself in? I mean,
you're kind of hitting on it a little bit. Again, I can remember distinctively sitting in this park in this town. I just pulled over, went and sat below this tree, and that was kind of where it hit me of just where I've gotten myself to. And again, you're talking about who I was at that point in time. It was way, way more selfish than anything else. It wasn't like I had any compassion at that point about the person that I'd murdered. It was just a realization of how fucked up I was inside, and where my life had got to. So, but what it did do is, you talk about my mom, she'd been the one putting me into treatment. And again, I checked out of medical advice, and the family was in an uproar about what's going on with Barry and everything. And so I give her a call, and I said, can I get back in treatment? Can you help me get back? And so the next morning, it's like, yeah, I'll get you back. So I went back into treatment, and again, the case itself is still unsolved. I go through a 28-day treatment program, and in the context of that program, kind of started dealing with what it was a 12-step program, so I was kind of dealing with, okay, this is what has recently happened. I was not at all ready or entertaining the idea to turn myself in, but at the same time, there was some evidence that was out there that I knew that I hadn't taken care of. I hadn't disposed of right. I hadn't gotten back to it. So I just went through treatment, kind of neglected this stuff, went back to work, had this thing weighing on me the whole time. And ultimately that evidence was found by 5 or 6 year old little kid. Parents, the dad is there. They kind of recognize it's about something. They're finding a sawed-off .22 rifle. They're finding money bags. They're finding things that don't look right. And they turn this in. That breaks the case. And so again, while I'm still like faking that I have this life all together, so forth, I'm out doing my job as a delivery man for a grocery store when the cops just kind of swarm in on me from out of everywhere, and that was the end of it.
Man.
Yeah.
Going through, you know, I know that, you know, it's like crazy because, like, you know, I always say to moms, usually the mom is the one who gets the information first. And I know I didn't even want to call my mom. I was like, man, I feel like shit. I mean, I'm like just gonna hopefully turn invisible. But you gotta, you know, your mom, you gotta, you know, when you don't even want to hear her voice because you already know you fucked up.
Yeah.
And I know, like, you sitting in there, man, you know, dealing with that. I mean, what was your family? Did they like try to like, dude, it's gonna be all right? I mean, what was your mom kind of like? How'd she cope with it, man?
Right. Well, they put me in jail, and I can't remember. Memories are kind of fuzzy from that point in time, but it was only a day or so, and they finally let her in, and it wasn't just her. It was like the whole family came in. There's the glass thing, but they let the whole family come in, and so basically, they were crushed. I mean, you can look at them.
Yeah.
They're crushed. They're absolutely wiped out. And what they, more than anything, just wanted to say is, you know, we still love you.
Yeah.
So, and that was the trial process. And so, and again, my family are there. They're real good people, you know, so they're not just looking at me.
Yeah.
They're looking at my victim's family. They're doing things I'm not anywhere near that place.
Yeah.
They have this sense of, listen, there's this other family out here who's lost their loved one, you know, and they're caught in the middle of all that. And so, yeah.
Oh, man, take your time, man. Like I said, I know, dude, like I said, I just dealing with my situation, but your situation, it's like, dude, I can only imagine. But I mean, you know, having your family still come to you as far as they still, you know, showing their support. That's in a situation like that. It's like, man, you know, especially knowing what you've done. It's like, I know that had to be. I don't even know what type of emotion you could have. I mean, I don't even know how you would even deal with that. I mean, it's having them there. I know it gives you a sense, at least you know, I can still exist. But I mean, it's the fact that they believed in you, you know, and you know, you never, you know, a child never wants less down as his parents, you know, his family. So I know that was just a crazy situation. You know, going through the trial process and stuff, man. I mean. Where there, you know, you know, you said you went to trial. Was it something that was pretty much, you know, clear cut, or did it get drawn out, or did you have like an attorney that kind of helped you negotiate at least your conditions as far as your sentence, or?
No, it was. It went to trial just because when the state's seeking the death penalty, there's really just no alternative.
Yeah.
That's just kind of, as a defendant, that's really the situation you're in. Is you just got to fight with whatever there is because they're seeking the death penalty, and that was the situation. There was never a plea that was offered. context-wise, again, my crime was in another small town up the road from where I was from, and you have the county sheriff on the stand during the trial, testifying about different parts of the investigation, but also testifying he's a close personal friend of the victim. Mm-hmm. So I mean, this was a very, very small town, and who she was just a pillar of the community. I mean, she was just her and her husband ran this grocery store, and she had two kids. I mean, just absolutely. Just she's doing what a good citizen is doing. She absolutely, and that was the context of this. So, and again, on my end, it would be nice to say that I had a lot of awareness about what these people were going through at the time, and that I was conscious of that. And that really didn't so much develop until after I got to prison, to be honest. What I was more than anything else was fear. I was just afraid. The state was trying to kill me, and that's what I was afraid of, or I was going to end up in prison for the rest of my life. I kind of see it for what it is at this point in time. That's what it is. So, but we went through trial, and as far as the evidence, it was pretty well overwhelming evidence, and the defense it was a defense that isn't a defense. It was I think the concept they called it was diminished capacity. But it was one where, you take responsibility for it, and there's no denial of it. Probably the one thing out of that process that I still kind of go, okay, Barry, at that one point, that probably really helped me along the way. And that was, I took the stand, I owned it, cross-examined. It was pretty brutal on that end of it. Basically dragged through the whole process of it, and I did my best to be honest. It wasn't a thing that's about making excuses or anything like that. And I think that was between, that day before going back into treatment, realizing how screwed up I was, going through treatment, and it's weird. I'm really grateful that I had a chance to go through that process before I was arrested, because it did. I wanted to get my life turned around, and that was actually before I was ever arrested. Right there was that spark that was there. So even when I was arrested, I continued kind of doing the same thing, and to me, that owning what I'd done became the first step.
And once you got sentenced, and you were, pretty much designated with what you had to face as far as what your what you're doing, your time and everything. I mean, was it pretty much was it a immediate transition into like changing or trying to find some type of purpose or meaning in life, as far as what you feel that you want to carry out, or did it take you a while to kind of like tune into or find what it is that you found purpose in? Or
right. I really do think that day before, again, that day that I kind of hit bottom, I was out of the coke, I was crashing on it, and that day I look back, there was that day that I was sitting under that tree where it just hit me how fucked up I was. I think that was the start of everything.
Okay.
And that's kind of gone forward. Ultimately, what the judge did was basically he compared me to some other men that were on death row and said, Barry's just not that guy. He's not these guys. And so the alternative was he gave me life without for the murder, and he gave me a consecutive indeterminate life for the robbery and a 10-year gun enhancement. And so that's been my situation. And it's strange because sometimes, and I consider myself in some ways to be the luckiest man in this prison. I really do. I was given a chance for life that, quite frankly, I don't think I deserved. All the elements were there in our state for a death penalty. All the elements. There was 4 aggravating factors. There's no cleaning it up. It is what it is. And the judge said, I'm not going to do that to you. And then after I got to prison, I made two really good friends, and one in particular who just kind of took me under his wing, and he was in the same kind of a situation. We were the same age, but he had been here since he was 18 years old, and he was in here on a murder. And so he kind of knew he was doing this. He was on the same place. He was like, "Yeah, I committed this horrible act. Where do I go with that?" And he kind of had a head start on that, and wouldn't sugar. I mean, he did not go easy on me. His whole thing was, "You're doing forever in here," and kind of like you don't need to be clinging to hope. What you need to do is be working on how do you put the steel in your soul to deal with your situation.
Yeah.
And that was it was really direct, it was really straightforward. And this friend, for the first 10 years, I mean, if you saw one of us, you saw the other. I mean, we were just that tight on this yard. And his friendship changed my life.
Wow. Yeah, it's crazy, man, how dark places, man, where you find just like, glimmers of light as far as just, spiritual inspiration or spiritual guidance or, things that help you make it through, these times. I know you've really been focused on in doing some things as far as to keep yourself occupied, and, some of them things are, beyond the scope what most people would imagine somebody with your background would be doing. But I mean, we talked a little bit about it before, but like, your involvement in like stocks and investing, man. Mm-hmm. I mean, how did you get into that?
So that's 34 years later. When I got here, I spent the first 10 or 15 years just trying to grow up, mm-hmm. just trying to deal with some stuff in here. I look back and I think the one thing I've had going for me the whole time was, man, I do not think this shit is cool. I do not dig it here. I do not like this crap. And I've never bought into the stuff that goes on every single day in here about how this is the life and everything about that. I have always just been disgusted, and I hate that shit. And I think that's one thing I got going for me, quite frankly, is that.
Yeah.
Because I might never get out of here, and that's the most likely outcome. But I do not think this shit is cool. I don't think this life is cool at all. So I spent 15 years kind of just basically concentrating on growing up, getting my life together. Like I say, with this friend of mine, he'd gone through this himself. He had his own bag of stuff that he had to deal with. Mm-hmm. So he started talking, and we started again on actually, Barry, you got to address what you did. And thinking about this young woman that I killed, thinking about this family that I stole her from, thinking about my own family.
Yeah.
So, the emotions I have about that today were not there then. There was just, like I said, I think that I had one seed of a conscience left, and that's what I've had to work with. But that's what I did. I came in here. I went to work out at the industries. Spent about 8 years just working, going to a job, kind of just focused on just trying to, how do you live a decent life in here, day to day, and to kind of transition to where we are today. About 17 years ago, 2003, I go home one day, and there's this poster up on the glass in the unit that says that the state is getting ready to try to terminate these injunctions that have been in place for this long-standing class action that's been going on in the yard called the Bala case. I bring that up because the Bala case is a big part of my life. It kind of ruled my life for the last 17 years. I've been one of the class representatives in that case for many years. But it was kind of like, it became that thing to where I transitioned from just being that really young guy that came in here and just had to learn how to figure out, his situation, to where you become a man and you're starting doing things for other people. So, for better or for worse, we've been involved in this Bala case for going on 17 years now, and I mean it touches a lot of areas of this case, and the people that are around this prison kind of understand that it has had a big influence in this yard, and I've been kind of in the middle of that. So I've had to think about in terms of class members. This yard are guys I have a responsibility of looking after, and I've had that responsibility for a number of years. And trying to do that in the most responsible way I could figure out how to do that. How do you make the right decisions in a adversarial situation where you're bucking heads with the people who keep you held, and you're butting up against them? But how do you do that in a responsible way? How do you do that in a respectful way? And I've had good days, and I've sure have had some bad days and all that. And in the context of that, getting into a whole bunch of other litigation too. That kind of became a big part of my life until more recently was the Bala case, other litigations, to where I kind of just got really deep in that. And I understand you had some of that experience in your background. And that kind of took over my life for a while. I got lost in it. Just too much of it, I think. But by the time I got to the end of it, I was definitely looking for what's next. And about 5 years ago, I got into this financial literacy class that they have here, and a friend of mine was one of the guys that helped start it, and he was a smart cat. He was in here on some securities fraud, mail fraud, but he had a background in being a broker and things like that, and I learned a lot from him. And he got involved in starting this class. I started taking it, and in the meantime, still had a ton of litigation going on. Bala was just off the hook busy. So I was trying to get my head around it, but still kind of go forward. And then just over the time, got some things closed up on some litigations. Bala came to a termination hearing just before COVID hit. We went into termination hearings on that. So I had some things that were kind of closing up. That went to termination, went through the trial. And then at the same time that's happening, I've been in 3 or 4 years of financial lit at this time, and I was able to finally actually get my brokerage account open on the streets. And at the same time that COVID opens, or comes out. And our class is kind of interesting because it's like that COVID is crashing the markets, and you got a bunch of guys in there that have been in there long enough. And they weren't panicking. They were like sharks smelling blood in the water. Everybody was going, how do we take advantage of what's going on here? Because it was like there's something going on, and we can really take advantage of this. And at the same time, just fortunate to have it that I had a little bit of money in my hand, was able to get this account open, and was able to kind of take off from there. And that was, I've just been really fortunate that I was able to start that at the bottom of the market and be able to come up with all that, and also we'd be in a position to understand that was like the opportunity of a lifetime. It really was. So that's kind of where we're at now, and it's been done well. That's kind of where I'm at today. That's what I do.
Yeah, so doing big things on Wall Street, man, and actually in here just kind of maintaining a positive attitude, right. and being a light to other individuals. What would you like to share with somebody watching this, or a young person who's maybe dealing with maybe drug addiction, or dealing with trying to find themselves, or maybe they're in just a bad place right now because with COVID, a lot of people are very depressed, and suicide's up. We got a lot of people who are disenfranchised, and they're looking for some type of hope, or something to aspire to.
Right. And that's where I kind of struggle. I don't know how relatable my story is, except to the one thing that that keeps coming up in my own life as I reflect is choices. Try to make good choices in your life, because if you're making bad choices and kind of going down that trail, you're the one that ends up paying the price for it, and that's that's what I see in my own life. Is I ended up in this really super bad place. It hurt a lot of people, and it's only been by trying to change those choices around that, and it's taken a long time to kind of like build things to get them. But I can see where, hey, listen, this didn't just start a couple of years ago. This has actually been something I've been working on, and those are starting to build some momentum too. So I guess that's my big take is I don't have that background where I came out of some big city. I don't have that background of super dysfunctional, drug addicted family. I don't have any of that kind of stuff that a lot of people can relate to. I came from a really straight-laced family that had really good values. But what I did is I made a bunch of horrible decisions.
Well, you know what I took from that, from listening to your interview and just kind of like putting it in perspective, is this is what a lot of people don't think about when they're doing these things. You think about maybe just your family, what you're doing, but what about the other people's family?
Right.
What about like the person that was in the bank that got terrified, that was on the ground, or like you said, the person who was caught up in the robbery? That family, is it not just them, their kids, they have a family. Right. There's all these other people, but you only think about what you immediately see or what what's in the proximity, and there's all these other dominoes that play into that. And nobody thinks about that. You did something, but what about your brother and sister? They're not there, but they're victims.
Right.
That person's nephew that is gone. There's all these other people. And, if a person thinks about that before maybe they slam some dope, or maybe before they cock that gun thinking about robbing, and they just like sit there for a minute and just think about all the dominoes, all the different things, maybe you think like, man, let me just go home. Maybe this is not the day for this, and that's the thing that it hit me when I think about it, because you don't think about all that. The people that's not all the other stuff, you're just thinking about the one plan. But there's all these other things that tie into that you never even thought that are connected.
Right.
And we're all connected somehow, all these different things. Look at it, full circle. I'm like I said, I'm here and this Idaho State, we're talking with you. I'm like, dude, how'd this come about? This shit's crazy, man. It's like surreal. I still have nightmares, about being in prison, man. And I know what you're going through. I wake up, oh my God, and I'm in my bed and I look over like, man, this shit's crazy. It's like, how did that happen? And I wonder, like, what did a bad kid go this way? So, like, your interview is going to hit a lot of people, because you don't have to come from the gangs. You don't have to come from, the abusive family or this or that, or, you can come from a good stock and still make bad choices. But if you see this, maybe you'll stop and be like, man, you know what? I'm going to sit down, pull my car over, think about what I'm doing, and say, you know what? Let me get some help.
Right.
And that's what this is about, man, is getting some help. Your pride and your ego, sometimes you think you don't need somebody. It's all right. You're not weak. You're not weak because you need help or you need somebody to talk to. It's all right, man. Sometimes, people need help to deal with a situation. Maybe needs to talk to somebody. It's not being weak because you're telling somebody how you feel about life, and they're gonna, oh man, you look a little sorry ass, you over here. No, man, sometimes you need that. So I think this right here, what you shared with us and our audience, is for, maybe there's somebody sitting at home right now and they're doing really bad. They're really in a dark place, and they watch this and they're like, man, I'm gonna call my mom, man. I'm gonna check in. I'm done. So you might have saved a lot of lives right now, man. So that's why your interview is important, your story. So don't ever think that your story doesn't impact somebody, and the families and people that are seeing, like, you telling your story. And yeah, there's two sides of it. But like I said, somebody could take something from this and maybe they'll stop and not do that what they were just thinking about doing. That's going to hurt somebody else's family, So, hey man, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this interview, and what your business and stocks and stuff, and helping other people, and hopefully helping other people find their truth. Mm-hmm. You can change some life that way. So hey man, Big Herc 916 fresh out here with Barry, man. I thank you, man.
Yeah.
And for sharing your story. subscribe, share, and man, Idaho State Prison, thank you for the opportunity. And Travis Ritchie, shout out to you, man.